Hello, yes, welcome to Sad Winter. So Jehovah's Witnesses are told to stay away from apostates, people who leave the organization and then speak up about their experiences because they might poison your mind with lies and misinformation. Apostates didn't make me leave Jehovah's Witnesses, the BITE model did. The BITE model was developed by cult expert Stephen Hassan and includes characteristics that will help you determine whether you're in a cult. I recently posted a video entitled My Story, Waking Up and Being Shunned by the Jehovah's Witness Cult. I was interviewed by former Jehovah's Witness Riley on the Jexit podcast, and he asked me what caused me to leave the organization, and I mentioned a few key highlights and events. Mostly I attribute the BITE model as being instrumental in my waking up process. But in the interview, I don't really go into a whole lot of depth explaining the BITE model, and that's what I want to do today. This is going to be one of the longer videos I've done. If you're looking for a 5-minute snapshot, this is not the one. I really want to give an in-depth look at the BITE model and explain how the Jehovah's Witnesses match a large portion of the identifying criteria. It was crucial to my waking up process, regaining control of my mind and life, so I don't really want to do a drive-by. Kind of want to do a deep dive in this one. The BITE model is divided into 4 quadrants: behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. So starting with behavior control, number 2, it says the group will dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates. So Jehovah's Witnesses may not be able to literally physically control who you live with or date or speak to, but if they disapprove of your choice, the elders will absolutely punish you. There will be consequences. Number 3, when, how, and with whom the member has sex. I've said this a million times and I'll say it again. Jehovah's Witnesses are some of the most sexually repressed people on the face of the earth. And here's my issue. You're like, look, I have my values. I believe in saving sex for marriage. That's totally cool. If that's your choice, you have every right to live by your values, so long as it is your choice. You're not being shamed, coerced, or influenced by purity culture that says you're trash if you have premarital sex. That's my issue, and that's my issue with the witnesses. Like, compared to other Christian denominations, Jehovah's Witnesses are tightly wound. This is not like, we go to the same school, this is my boyfriend, we hold hands and go to the football game. Nah. You can't hold hands, casually sit together at the meetings, their version of church. You have no privacy. There's a chaperone on your dates, or at least they try to push this. If you need to impose this level of surveillance and the threat of punishment on your members, then it's not really about upholding these pure Christian values. Because if that's the case, if two people are really dedicated, they're dating, they want to wait, they made a promise to God or whatever, they're going to do that because they truly believe it. They've made a commitment to God and each other, and they're going to wait. But in the case of the witnesses, and why I think this totally applies to them in the BITE model, is it's all about control. Grown adults are forever infantilized and treated like children who are incapable of making wise decisions or regulating their sexual impulses. It's insulting and it's ineffective because the more tightly wound an environment you create, they're more likely to rebel anyway. And I can't tell you how many cases I've heard of Jehovah's Witnesses, who got married too young because that was the only way they could have sex and their marriage was a disaster, or they were struggling with sexual dysfunction, or even if everything's working fine, they just have this shame after they're married. So this definitely applies. And if you get divorced, the elders dictate whether you can get remarried or not, but more on this later. Okay, number 4, control types of clothing and hairstyles. This applies to the Jehovah's Witnesses. For over 100 years, men weren't allowed to wear beards, and sisters weren't allowed to wear pants to the meetings. You could literally be censured. You could get in trouble and lose privileges. And now, as of 2024, the leadership is allowing you to do these things. But despite these, recent policy changes or whatever, the organization has always tried to maintain this appearance of really overly wholesome uniformity. Number 6, manipulation and deprivation of sleep. When I first saw this, I wasn't like, the witnesses aren't doing hard manual labor at 2 a.m. or being forced to stay awake as some sort of sick punishment by the leadership, but it does still apply because they have a strict routine of meetings and service, and this includes forcing children to go to their meetings midweek. So basically pushing them to stay awake on a school night when they probably should be getting to bed a little early or at least resting for the next school day. I know, I was one of them. I was in public school K through 12. I was up early. I went to school all day. I was exhausted. I came home. I had homework. But during those midweek meetings, you're supposed to be there from 7:30 to 9:45. And of course, there's the prep and the driving there. and my father was an elder, and my father would have to stay for a special elders meeting, like a meeting just for the elders, after the regular meeting. So my father would work all day, come home, barely grab a bite to eat, get dressed, and then he'd have to go to the meeting and then have an elders meeting afterwards. Sometimes my father wouldn't come home till midnight. I resented the whole elder thing because I saw what it did to my father and what it did to families. So yeah, I would say they absolutely mess with your sleep cycle and rhythm. And that's just the meetings. There's plenty of examples of the organization demanding the majority of your time through service or free labor. Moving on. Number 7, financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. So they badmouth college and discourage members from seeking employment that would pay well because they know it'll take people away from time that could be spent at meetings and in service. Again, free labor. And as a result, a lot of families, suffer unnecessary financial hardship. And what's even more manipulative and sickening is they tell you that because of your decision to put God first, aka Watchtower, God will bless you. BS. God's not going to put gas in your car or buy your baby diapers. And then a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses will adopt this poverty mindset and equate their struggles with dedication and righteousness when actually they're being irresponsible and putting their family at risk. Also, a lot of witnesses donate their time and resources to build kingdom halls throughout the world, only for the organization to flip the property and keep the profits. So yeah, this one definitely applies. Oh, okay, so at number 8 and 9, restrict leisure, entertainment, vacation time, major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. So between meetings and preaching, which Jehovah's Witnesses are at the minimum required to be there 2 to 3 times a week, some are there almost every day because they're pioneers or they're serving in some larger capacity, they're dedicating most of their free time to preaching. Your whole life revolves around being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. This isn't just church, and that's no slam on people who go to church. Meetings and service for Jehovah's Witnesses dominate your schedule. Young people, teenagers in the congregation are discouraged from engaging in any kind of extracurricular activities at school, like organized sports, music, dance. The organization, no matter who you are, the organization always comes first. Okay, number 10, permission required for major decisions. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, witnesses need permission. They need permission to get remarried if they divorce. The elders are given full authority to insert themselves into your intimate partner relationships. When they don't have to live with this person, they don't know the intimate everyday dynamics of this relationship. They don't know what kind of home life the kids might be going through. Because like a common argument is, oh, stay together for the kids, stick together for the children. No, sometimes people just need to get divorced. They have a miserable marriage, and the kids see that. They're not stupid, and they're subjected to a really volatile home life with screaming and fighting, possibly domestic violence. But the elders are going to claim that they know what's best for you and your family. That's how this works in the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's all about control, and that's what makes them a cult. Okay, number 11, rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. So if you're in good standing, you get to comment, give talks, perform certain tasks in the congregation, or hold certain titles that distinguish you above everyone else. And there's a system of penalties ranging from being reproved and kind of getting a slap on the wrist, but you're not actually kicked out. Or you can be disfellowshipped or removed, meaning you can be excommunicated and shunned by your family in the congregation. And if you try to get reinstated, get back in their good graces, be in good standing again, you have to perform penance and prove your worthiness. Number 12, discourage individualism, encourage groupthink. Yeah, if you're the more creative type, artsy, hipster, whatever, or you just want to think for yourself, you have a tendency to draw outside the lines, this is not really for you, you want to be able to make your own decisions without being threatened, yeah, you're going to have a hard time as a witness because they have a very canned, manufactured look and fellowship that feels forced. They call each other the worldwide brotherhood. They definitely endorse a group mentality. They don't want you to focus too much on hobbies or anything that would set you apart as an individual or from their corporate agenda. Number 13, impose rigid rules and regulations. Jehovah's Witnesses are extremely legalistic and letter of the law. There's no room for flexibility or nuance. Every area of your life is regulated. Friendships, sex life, career and finances. They try to control every aspect of your life. Number 18, instill dependence and obedience. Jehovah's Witnesses are constantly told to be obedient to the elders and the men taking the lead among you, and to the governing body, no matter what. And they instill this dependency by isolating you from the outside world. They isolate you from your classmates, coworkers, non-believing relatives. That way, if you ever leave the organization, you're screwed. It's a deterrent. to keep you enslaved because you don't have a support system in the outside world. Like, you won't know how to function. Or at the very least, it can be extremely lonely and scary. And they know this. They know what they're doing. And a lot of witnesses have experienced homelessness at a young age because their parents kicked them out of the house. So this definitely applies. Number 22, rape. Jehovah's Witnesses have a chronic systemic child sexual abuse problem where tens of thousands of sexual predators were never reported to law enforcement. And there are countless cases of domestic violence, assault, and date rape. Number 23, separation of families. If you are a baptized Jehovah's Witness and you ever leave, you will be shunned by your Jehovah's Witness family. Even if you're not baptized, the organization will find a way to drive a wedge between you and your family and paint you as a dangerous influence. And sometimes the outcome is the same, you're still shunned. Okay, moving on to information control. Number 1, deception. Deliberately withhold information, distort information to make it more acceptable, systematically lie to the cult member. When you get baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it appears as if you're giving consent, but you cannot truly consent to something as a minor, and you cannot consent to something where there is a lack of transparency. Jehovah's Witnesses are not able to make an informed decision because they're not given all the information, because no decent human being would sign up for a group that is involved in the sexual abuse of minors and the obstruction of justice. No reasonable human being would sign up to study with Jehovah's Witnesses if they knew up front that families brutally shun loved ones who leave. Everything on their website is distorted to make them more appealing and socially acceptable, and they are masters at revisionist history, systematically lying to and gaslighting their members about their past and present operations. Number 2, minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, books, media, critical information, former members. Jehovah's Witnesses live in a highly censored echo chamber. They've always been discouraged from pursuing higher education. Members are pressured to only read literature and media produced by the organization. They used to denounce the internet, like the internet was bad, don't go on the internet. And now they use it to spread their propaganda on jw.org. They have their own apps and logo. They have their own broadcasting channel when they used to rail against televangelism. And the level of hubris to think that you can use the internet to your advantage, but also tell your people, oh, only go to jw.org. They're told to avoid apostates. They call these people mentally diseased. It's all apostate lies, even when a lot of these people have endured severe physical, sexual, psychological, or spiritual abuse at the hands of their religious leaders, and they're trying to raise awareness of these abuses. Number 3, compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Ensure that information is not freely accessible. Control information at different levels and missions within group. Allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. Yes, Jehovah's Witnesses are highly secretive when they don't have the right to be. We're not talking about individual personal freedom and the right to privacy. We're talking about organized religion that is using unethical methods and lack of transparency to rope you into something that's going to control you for the rest of your life. Yes, the elders know everything before the rest of the congregation. They decide who's in the club and who's not, who gets to know what and when. The most glaring example of this is the Secret Elders Handbook, the Shepherd the Flock of God book that outlines hundreds of rules and regulations, many of which even practicing Jehovah's Witnesses are not even aware of, including stipulations for allowing child abusers to remain in the congregation while their victims are coerced into silence. Number 4, encourage spying on other members. Impose a buddy system to monitor and control members, report deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership. Ensure that individual behavior is monitored by group. Jehovah's Witnesses definitely use an informant system. They want to make sure that your friends are only other Jehovah's Witnesses so they can keep tabs on you. So then if you screw up or, just express doubts, you just think you're talking to a friend, they'll report it to the elders. And this is true of all ages, but Jehovah's Witnesses definitely have an old hen problem. And if you're offended by that phrasing, it's probably because you are one. They definitely have a gossip problem in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Gold medal in gossip. And I can't tell you how many articles I remember where it said, do you need to encourage your friend? Do you notice your friend expressing themselves in ways that, don't align with the organization? Are they struggling spiritually? How can you help them? Rat them out to the elders. Jehovah's Witnesses are not your friends. And even if they don't rat you out, they just might back off and distance themselves, so your rebel influence doesn't rub off on them. It's a pretentious move. Number 5, extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including newsletters, magazines, various media, misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. So this goes back to what I talked about earlier. They only want you consuming their literature and media. And yes, they have a long-standing reputation of quoting experts or professors in their literature. And those people actually came back and were like, whoa, you're taking something out of context. That's not what I meant. So yeah, this definitely applies. Number 6, unethical use of confession, withholding forgiveness or absolution. So if you're disfellowshipped or removed from the congregation, whether you're guilty or not, whether your situation really does deserve compassion and flexibility, it doesn't matter. It's a kangaroo court. It doesn't matter if you're composed or if you cry your guts out. The elders just love to F with you. So let's say someone gets disfellowshipped or removed, that person is expected to show up to all the meetings, look like they're really sorry for what they've done, show penance, have that sad face. This isn't about genuine mercy from the Lord. They're expected to grovel for the elders' approval. And the elders will still withhold reinstatement or absolution for 6 months, a year. And whatever you tell elders in any official private meeting with them gets documented and follows you around on your publisher card. So basically, you're always on the grid. You never really get a clean slate. It's a power grab. Now, moving on to thought control. Number 1, require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, adopting the group's map of reality as reality, instill black and white thinking, decide between good versus evil, organize people into us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. This is Jehovah's Witnesses in a nutshell. They believe they have the one truth, with a capital T. Every other religion and ideology is wrong, and they divide the world into 2 categories: Jehovah's Witnesses, who are obviously the good guys, and worldly people, or non-Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, number 3, use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. I don't even know where to start with this. Again, worldly, apostate, true worship or true Christians, encouragement, endurance, humility, wholesome association. I actually did a video recently called Trigger Warning, where I talk about a lot of the buzzwords or trigger words that Jehovah's Witnesses use. A lot of Jehovah's Witness jargon, this absolutely applies, so you can look at those 2 videos, part 1 and part 2. Okay, so there's a bunch here. Encourage only good and proper thoughts. Number 4, kind of going down, teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing, stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts. And it says denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking, meditating, praying, singing, or humming. Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to be happy and grateful all the time for their spiritual heritage, even after spending decades in the organization and things just aren't adding up. They may have questions and doubts, and if you express these doubts, then you're on a dangerous path. You're ungrateful for the spiritual blessings that come with being a Jehovah's Witness and having the truth. They don't meditate in the sense of like yoga or a mindfulness practice, but they're constantly immersed in their literature. They're told to meditate on what they learn, meaning self-indoctrinate. Just really think about it. Just really let it soak in. Basically keep up their diet of cult indoctrination through all their study materials. They're told, if they're having doubts or maybe they just have a normal libido and they're sexually frustrated, to pray and ask God to help them adjust their attitude or pray the feelings away. And yes, they sing at their meetings, and a lot of the songs are about staying faithful. Like, keep going, stay faithful despite, trials, stay faithful to Jehovah, even though you want to claw your eyes out because you're so over it. Okay, another clump here. These are they all apply to the witnesses. Rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism, forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy allowed, labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. Again, these are all self-explanatory and fit the witnesses. You're expected to follow the direction of the governing body blindly, despite massive errors and scandals. And of course, anyone who leaves is just bitter and angry and, spewing lies and misinformation. Okay, so number 11, instill new map of reality. So Jehovah's Witnesses believe that God does not cause suffering, he allows it. Basically, Jehovah is just giving humanity plenty of time to screw up and suffer immeasurably so he can prove that he's the best leader. And they believe that Jesus is going to overthrow all earthly governments and turn the earth into a paradise or utopia where everyone is young, like the 23-year-old version of themselves, including like your parents and grandparents, which would just be super weird. And no one ever dies. There's never an overpopulation problem, and dead people are going to be resurrected. And if they never had a chance to become a Jehovah's Witness in the old world, they have the chance to study the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses in paradise. I remember when I was a little kid and I heard this, I was sitting at the meeting when they were explaining this, and I looked at my mom and I was like, Mama, are you serious? Like, we have to go to, I really asked her, I was like, do we have to go to meetings and do service in paradise? Do we still have to do this? And she was like, yes, honey, a lot of people have to learn about Jehovah. And I was just like, oh God, this is gonna suck. I gotta still go to meetings and service in paradise. And then a lot of their belief system also hinges on the date 1914, to the point that they had to create a video on their website explaining it to their own members, because even witnesses can't explain it without sounding like Looney Tunes. Then they have the overlapping generations teaching that is pure lunacy and has caused a lot of people to actually wake up and leave. So yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses definitely have their own map of reality and have their own understanding of how the world works. Okay, so finally we have emotional control. So number 1, manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. Teach emotion stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, doubt. Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Yeah, so this is a big one. Again, they'll say, how can you adjust your attitude? Even the governing body came out with an article trying to absolve themselves of responsibility, saying, we're not inspired nor infallible. So basically we screw up like everyone else, but we're still requiring, your unquestioning loyalty and obedience. Doesn't add up. Promotes feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as you are not living up to your potential. They do this all the time. Could you be doing more for Jehovah? It's never enough. Your family is deficient. Your affiliations are unwise. Jehovah's Witnesses talk about bad association. Your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish. And then just all of number 5, instill fear, such as fear of thinking independently, the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation, leaving or being shunned by the group, others' disapproval. Extremes of emotional highs and lows, love bombing and praise one moment and then declaring you a horrible sinner. Number 8, phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside the group. And that's a big one. Jehovah's Witnesses claim that they have the best life ever. I mean, where else are you going to go? Shunning of those who leave, fear of being rejected by friends and family. Obviously, this is a huge issue to me, but also this is one of those things that, when people sometimes tell me, and I know they mean well, they'll say things like, oh, well, all religion is sort of a cult. There are groups, whether it's organized religion or just groups of people who have good intention. Their belief system makes them a better person. They treat others with dignity and respect. You might not agree with them or you might not be interested in what they're teaching, but that doesn't necessarily make them a cult. When you start telling me I can't speak to my mother or a mother can't speak to her child, then you got a cult on your hands. So I like the fact that they mention this in the cult criteria. Finishing out, never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family or counselor, or seduced by money, sex, or rock and roll. And that's so true. There is never a good, legitimate reason to leave, even though there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. And you should just be able to leave. So this bite model is what woke me up. And when I read this, and everything clicked, it changed my life. Now, I want to be clear that the YouTube community, the apostates that I did find on YouTube, were incredibly inspiring. Inspired me so much so that I started my own channel. You absolutely need that when you are waking up. It is absolutely healing and validating. And all these stories corroborate. You need to know that you're not alone. You're not going crazy. Don't let the organization gaslight you, and also study the bite model for yourself. So yeah, I've been wanting to do this for a while. I wanted to do a deep dive. If you want more information, you can go to Freedom of Mind and check out the bite model, read more of Stephen Hassan's work. I'll leave a link in the bio. But yeah, if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you've been watching this, you've been brave enough to watch this, don't take my word for it. Go to the bite model. So anyways, I hope you guys found this helpful. Hope you have a happy new year and see you soon.